It's been a minute since I've done a tutorial, so I am coming to you guys today with a mason jar tutorial. I'm also going to be teaching you how to make your own neon pink alcohol ink, which is super exciting to me because I've been playing with it. I've been playing with the technique and playing with the color, and I've got lots of fun stuff that have come out of it, so I decided I would share with you guys. I will go over the supplies and where I got them. Everything except for the mica. I want to give you guys a heads up. I do not have a supplier for the mica powder that I used, but I am working on getting a reliable source for that at this time. So as soon as I can get that updated and let you know where a good place to get that from, if you don't already have one, then we will update the post accordingly. So I'm going to be working today with a asparagus jar. You can order these, it's got a football inside of it, but you can order these from walmart.com. It's a wide mouth and it's a Ball brand. I don't know what else I can tell you. I believe they're 24 ounces, I think. They're pretty big, but I'm going to be using that. I'm going to be painting it white with acrylic paint. I just use Anita's, I know it's backwards, I'm sorry, but Anita's acrylic paint from Hobby Lobby when I'm doing alcohol ink stuff. If I can't get outside and spray paint, then I use the acrylic paint. If you can take your cups outside and spray paint them with a flat white paint, that is a little bit easier, it's faster, it gives a smoother finish. So, but for tutorial's sake and for getting this done, I am going to be using acrylic paint so that I don't have to be going back and forth inside outside. So let me get everything together right here and we will get started. Okay, so the supplies that I'm going to be using today are the new fluorescent pink dye from Alumilite.com. This is a dye that is made for epoxy. A tiny, tiny bit goes a long way. Literally just a couple drops of this and you will have the coverage that you need. You mix it into your epoxy. You can do your molds with it. You can coat your stainless steel tumblers with it. Endless possibilities for this. I am going to be using it today to make a hot pink alcohol ink. A sparkly hot pink alcohol ink, actually. And I'm also going to be using a glittery mica powder. So if you have a white pearlescent powder, actually, if you have this from Alumilite.com, their pearlescent powder, sorry about the wobbles, this will work as well. Okay, so I will show you both ways with that. Let's get started. Okay, today I'm going to be using these little bottles. I got these from the Alumilite website at alumilite.com, same place that I got the dye. I prefer these bottles when I'm making my own inks just because I like the tips on them. So you cut the tip. And I like to be able to add micas and glitters and things like that to my inks that I make at home. Whereas if you're using a bottle like this, it can be a little harder for the pigments that you put in there to come through that type of lid. Not impossible, but just a little bit more difficult. So, using this bottle, I put my rubbing alcohol, you're not going to be able to see this, in a soap pump from Walmart so that I can pump it into whatever I need to use it for. Let me see if I can back you guys up. Okay, got you a little backed up there. So that way you can actually see what I'm doing. So I take these bottles and I just pump the alcohol into it. Just as easier than trying to funnel it in or dump it in. And I only fill it up halfway because a little bit of ink goes a long way when you're using alcohol inks, and you have to use less products when you're only filling it up halfway. So I fill it up halfway with 91% isopropyl alcohol. And then I drop in the dye. And I'm going to put quite a bit of the dye in here because I want this particular ink to be very, very pigmented. shake the bottle down. So I want to put a couple good sized squeezes in there. You can see I just squeezed that dye in there. To make sure that my homemade inks are opaque the way I want them to look. If you want them to not be opaque, then you skip this step, but if you're wanting that solid, not see-through color, I add a little bit of the white dye from Alumilite. I spilled a little bit out, so this one got a little messy. So and literally when you're putting the white in there, it's a drip. Like, it's the smallest amount that you can actually fathom getting in there. So you can see that tiny little drop that went in. Bitty, bitty, bitty. Okay. I'm glad I'm wearing an apron because I have stuff all over my hands. The next step would be adding the micas or the pearlescent dust, whatever you have. This is the pearlescent dust from Alumilite, pearlescent powder from Alumilite. Honestly, it just gives a gorgeous pearl sheen. So I'm going to put some of that into this pink dye. And I'm going to go ahead and do a pretty good size. This is 1/8 of a teaspoon, 1/8 of a teaspoon size measurement. And I'm going to put that right into the bottle. Okay. Make sure if you do get these bottles, if you decide to use these bottles from alumilite.com, that you cut the tip. That's how you want it to look. If you don't cut it, then your ink is trying to come through that tiny little pinhole, and it's just not going to. So this just pops right back in. Make sure it's pressed down. Screw the lid on tight and then start shaking it up. And you want to shake it for at least a minute to make sure that all of the dye that you squirted in there is incorporated into the alcohol. And if you do make these, they will separate. This is the mica and other stuff that I've put into this particular one. But you just shake it up and it's good to go. Like, see how sparkly it is in there? Okay. So this is the one that we just made. It's got the pearl in there. You can see it's super bright and it's got the pearl. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this jar white and then we're going to ink it. Okay, so I have my paint squirted into a cup here so it's easier for me to dip my brush in. I didn't tape anything off because this has a lip on it right there. So I'm just going to take my paint right to that little edge and just coat the entire thing. Sorry, I was out of focus there. Again, if you want to skip this step and you want to take this outside, you could tape this part off and just spray paint the entire thing with a flat white spray paint. Just taking the brush all the way around the cup. from top to bottom, so that I can prevent all of the brush streaks. Now I'm going to let this layer of paint dry. I'm going to come back and I'm going to do one more layer and then we're going to ink it. Okay, so the first layer of the paint has dried. I'm going to go ahead and apply a second layer and let that dry. And I go in kind of heavy with the paint to avoid brush marks, streak marks, whatever you want to call them. Nobody wants them. Make sure that you're not doing a lot of back and forth with your brush. You're just going from one end to the other. That's also going to help you avoid the brush marks. Now on these little raised pieces here, you do have to go one direction and then the other direction to cover those completely. And just make sure I got the bottom. It's easy to miss that curve on the bottom. Okay, now I'm going to let this second layer dry as well, and I will be back to do the inking. Okay, so this guy is all dry. We have 2 coats of acrylic paint from Hobby Lobby. Now, I did not use white on this cup. The color that I used is pale gray. Pale gray, white, any light color is going to work. It's going to pop just fine. I've used it underneath the pink before, so the pale gray is going to be perfectly fine underneath this. I need to replace my white for sure, though. So I'm going to be using one of these guys to apply the ink onto my cup. These were not sold with the intention of being used with alcohol inks. It's more of a soft sponge, but they work perfectly for blending the alcohol inks. So I have repurposed them. I know that Ranger is coming out with this same little tool, but they have the sponges on here that are made to work with alcohol inks. But I'm going to tell you straight up, the ones that come with this already, they work. They're perfectly fine. So this I got at my Michael's. I am going to post a link below to an Etsy store that sells the alcohol inks. If you guys are looking for inks and your Joann's and your Michael's are out of them, because we all know you can't get all the colors you want because they come in kits, I'm going to direct you to someone who can hook you up. So there's that tool. I already have one with the pink on it. You guys can see this cup back here has the pink on it as well as some other colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the pink that we made, and then I can add other colors to it as needed. And that way I can also see if I need to add more dye or if it is colored as I want it to be. Be careful when you open it. I spilled. I was not being careful. Okay, so I'm just going to apply that to the sponge. And then we're going to see if this is as pigmented as I want it to be or if I need to add more of the dye. And I tend to tap on the paper a little bit so that I don't get an overflow of color on my cup right out of the gate, because you can always add more and layer it. That looks pretty good. Of course, it's not going to show up as bright as it really is on the screen. Just going to continue doing this around the cup randomly, and then I'm going to add some other colors into it. Don't forget the bottoms. Do not neglect your bottoms, guys. And I'm just pouncing this little tool into the cup. spreading the color around. This is the boring part, sorry. Okay, the other colors that I'm going to be using on this particular cup, I'm going to be using a mixture of the Pinata ink from Jacquard. And I ordered this from Amazon. This is the color Magenta. And I'm also going to be using Wild Plum from Ranger, Tim Holtz. Again, I will post a link for you guys to be able to purchase the inks and the accessories individually, because I know how much of a bear it can be to find the colors that you need to complete your sets. So I'm going to start with the Pinata. And I'm just going to dot that on, and I'm going to go into these places where I did not go with the bright pink. And all of this is going to get blended, so I'm not worried about how that looks right now. We're going to go over this with a couple different layers. So I really am just going in now, laying down the colors that I want. And if you get ink up here, like I'm doing, so that I can get it all the way into that little notch right there, it's fine. You can go back with a paper towel or a Q-tip with some alcohol on it and wipe that right off. That is not going to be permanent. Again, don't neglect your bottom. Nothing fancy right now, right? I'm going to use the same pad that I'm using the Magenta Pinata ink. I'm going to use the same one for the Wild Plum because they're very similar in color. They're just different in, I don't want to say consistency, because the consistency of alcohol ink is pretty much the same, but the Ranger inks are thinner, I've noticed. They are a little thinner than the Pinata inks. So I'm just going to put that right on there. And then I'm going to take this in anywhere that there's still white showing. Okay, here's the fun part. Now that all those colors are laid down, I'm going to go back in. Let me wipe this off. I'm going to go back in with my hot pink, and I'm going to layer over the top. I'm going to layer over the top with the hot pink that we made. Giving that a little bit of a shake there to make sure it's all incorporated. You can see the sparkle. Because this is going to be a little bit thinner consistency than the others, it's going to help blend all those colors in together. So this is going to go right along all of these edges where the colors meet and around the top. I'm just taking the sponge and I'm making sure I'm dabbing it right up in to that edge to get all of the white covered. So it's starting to really blend. It's giving a nice variation of color all the way through the cup. Sorry it's so quiet, guys. I would play music, but YouTube shuts those down. So I can't play music. So you guys can see. I'm not sure if I can turn the flash on or not. That was not what I wanted to do. I'll have to take a video of this with the flash because in person you can see all of that pearlescent that we added to this homemade neon ink. I'm just going back through, and anywhere where I wanted that bright pink, I'm just layering a little bit more on. The more layers, the more dimension and color you're going to get. This is why I love this little tool. It makes the blending so easy. Okay. So I'm going to be done with the inking on this. The next step is going to be adding glitter. And I'm going to add glitter to the epoxy. So what I'm going to do before this gets anything on it is I'm going to take it outside and I'm going to spray seal it because you have to seal your inks. This is what I'm going to use to spray seal it. You guys can get your screenshots there if you're on your phone. This is my spray sealer. I'm going to spray a nice coat on this so that it's all completely sealed in there so that it doesn't budge when I add the epoxy. For those that don't know, epoxy is a solvent. So if you add it right on top of things that can be diluted, such as like an alcohol ink or anything like that, then it's just going to eat your colors. They're not going to stay vibrant. They're going to fade away and not be pretty. Okay, so I will be back after I take this outside and seal it, and we will add the epoxy and the glitter.